Hey, we are live on the red carpet, and with me is celebrity chef Paul Friedman, all the way from South Africa, although he's in the United States now. Thank you so much for being here, chef.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I just love that accent. You're going to have to talk to me all night. Is that okay?
Oh, that's fine. Most of women do.
Well, you have a very interesting background. You've owned 58, 5-8
Yes,
restaurants.
restaurants.
Where did this passion of cooking come from?
Well, it was all my mother's fault, to be honest. She had no idea what she was doing. But
Yay, Mom.
yeah, So I know the story is because my brother's 6 years older than me. And he said, when you came home from the hospital with Mom, you cried, but not like a normal child. You did not stop crying. And they kind of figured out what was wrong because Mom had decided from having my three older siblings, she breastfed them, said that was enough for her. So I got the formula. And I'm 61, so 61 years ago, the formula in South Africa had just been introduced. So they thought I had colic, so they changed the formula once and twice. And after 3 weeks, my mom said, I've had enough, can't take this anymore. She said to our maid, who was an amazing cook, she said, get him out the house or I'm going to kill him. So my maid took me out the house in the back where she was living, and she took everything she needed for the formula to feed me. And as she was preparing it, she realized that as she was dabbing it to make sure it wasn't too hot, she realized that there was barely anything coming out of the bottle. So she took a needle and poked it in there and put it back in my mouth, and I scarfed that milk up in 30 seconds. I was starving to death, which is why I was crying. I'm lucky to be alive, right? And so she then takes me and ties me on her back, like most of the maids do in South Africa, right? Because that's how they raise their children, on the back, and they take them all over the place. So I spent the first 2 years on my maid's back, because when she took us back in the house, Mom said, what happened? Look, he's sleeping. So yeah, I finally had something to eat, and I was, So she said, oh well, thank goodness we know what the problem is. Just keep him on your back. So I spent the next 2 years on my maid's back, and I was always in the kitchen. So I learned how to cook through the art of smell, through the nose.
So tell me about your first restaurant. It was quite the adventure for you, right?
Yes, in fact, the very first restaurant that I owned was kind of by accident, because I'd worked for my relatives and decided I was going to quit. I was going to work for them. I said to my mom, I'm never going to work in a restaurant again, especially not for families. I mean, it's ridiculous. The hours are crazy. So I took a little trip to Europe, put a little hammersack over my shoulder, and off I went. And I came back 7 months later, and I experienced so much food in Europe, and the French and the Italians, and I grew up with that in South Africa, because when the natural resources in South Africa were discovered, like gold and diamond and platinum and uranium, Europe just like swarmed onto the South African coast. And so we grew up with all these cultures, and now here I am in Europe tasting all of these things. So when I came back after that 7 months later, I said, you know what, I think I really want to pursue the restaurant industry. And I had the art of the smell, and I remember first things, when you look back and you say, what are the first things that I can recollect as like I'm on this earth? Some kids will remember throwing balls or riding a bicycle. I remember planting little seeds in our backyard and growing trees. And when I grew up, that was about 3 or 4 years old, and by the time I was 12, I had a peach tree, a pear tree, a plum tree in my backyard. I was growing mint, and I think it was just in my blood, and because of being in the kitchen for the first 2 years. So I applied to this job, and I met this guy. His name is Mike, and it was a 6:30 interview in the morning. And I'm like, why are you interviewing me at 6:30 in the morning? Well, we interviewed for about 2 hours, and he said, so you really think you can manage a restaurant? And I was like 19. I was like, there's no way I can manage a restaurant, right? So I said yes, being confident. So he opens a drawer, and he takes...
Wait, no, you lied, right?
Yes, of course. Of course. I mean, I wanted a job, that's all I needed, a job, right? So he took out a set of keys and threw it on the desk. He says, there's the keys to the restaurant. And he gave me the address. He says, you're the manager, go open. And I said, right now? He said, you want the job? I said, yes. He says, well, there you go. Well, I have never experienced anything so intimidating in my life. I took the keys, went over there. There were 8 people standing outside waiting for me to open the door. I opened the door. The alarm went off. I was like, it was an impossible thing for me to overcome. And then as the day progressed, the head waiter came, and then there was the assistant manager, and there were a few other people. They helped me get through the first week. It was unbelievable. I will never lie again in my life. But anyway, I became very successful, helped him build his location there. And then he took me, about 6 months later, he came up to me and he said to me, I want to show you something. So I got in the car with him and we went up to this really nice area of Johannesburg, South Africa. And he showed me this restaurant. It was called the Great American Hamburger Disaster. I was like, why would you call a restaurant that, right? Well, anyway, it was a disaster. They went out of business, and he said to me, would you like to purchase this as a franchise from me? And I said, well, I don't have any money. He said, all it's going to take is $10,000. And I said, well, let me go ask my mom. So I went to my mom, and that's all she had. It was her life savings. And I mean, I pleaded with my mother, and she didn't want to part, but I just, it's that story when you keep pestering and pestering, finally you just say, oh, well, take it, So she helped me. She gave me the money, and I opened my very first restaurant when I was 21. And I was so successful that Mike was sending people to me to train for franchising. Wow. And so after the second person I trained for franchising, I said, I'm not doing this anymore unless you make me a partner. So I was about 22, 23. And he said, we'll sell your franchise. You can partner with me. You can be the operations director of the company, and you can be the one who opens all the restaurants. So that's how my restaurant career began. And I started taking the plans, hiring the general contractors, and doing a turnkey. People would buy our franchise, and I'd hand it to them and go open another one. And in the process, I learned all the ways and ideas and cooking and so on. So I didn't feel like at that stage that I was really like a chef. Yeah. I was more like a restaurant operator. And then as time progressed, I would create dishes, I would come up with new menu items, and it just evolved. And everyone was saying, man, this is great, your food's amazing. Never been to school. Wow. So it was, in fact, I went to the best school money can buy. It's free. The name of the Arts Institute is Joycey Matoitoi. That was my maid. It was on her back. so that's what happened. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so your maid taught you well, right?
Oh, yes, she did.
You now just opened your latest restaurant.
Yes.
Tell me about this restaurant, where it's located.
Yes. The restaurant that we have is called Peli Pali, and we wanted to create a South African influence with a little bit of fusion and not really be here for South Africans because we live in America. So how do we get the American palate to understand South African culture? Right. And so that was the most important thing for me to establish. So how do we do that? How do we infuse it? And how do we use the products of South Africa, bring them to America, and infuse them with the American palate? So we spent countless months, weeks, days, years. We spent 2 years doing this before we actually came up with the menu. And then everyone said, wow, you've got something really great here. That's when I met my partner Michael and Thomas. I had several pizzerias at the time that I was operating, and through one of my unfortunate divorces. I don't have 57 ex-wives, by the way.
Thank goodness, right?
Yes, they have all the other ones now, but there's only 3 of them. But That's
why he has 58 restaurants.
That's right.
You got to keep going.
Yes, and my mother warned me. She said, you're going to be just like your Uncle Louis. Because he had 3 restaurants. I said, I don't want to work for him, no. But there's a secret, you see. And so my mom gave me the secret. It's all about food, and that if you put the right herbs and spices, it becomes very addicting. And so she gave me this one spice that my Uncle Louis would put in everybody's food, and that's why he was so successful, because people would keep coming back. And so she said, you're going to be like your Uncle Louis, so you're going to get divorced. Because the restaurant business that's the way it is, because your wives will always think that there's another mistress in your life, and it's your restaurant, because you just, there's nothing you can do about it. If you're serving food, you're only as good as your last meal. So, you have to constantly be there. You have to make sure that the operation runs right. The food is always correct. It's got to be hot. It's got to be fresh. And there's so many intricate things that people don't know about the restaurant industry. So anyway, I fell in love with cooking. So that's just something that, people were saying, yeah, your food's so great and your flavors are amazing. And, one has to be careful with this, because a lot of the times, someone will say, oh, you should open up a restaurant because your food is good, right? Yeah. But you have no idea how to run a restaurant. So you go open a restaurant because your family tells you to, and it fails. And so we in the restaurant industry have probably the highest rate of failure in any kind of business. And it's because people don't know how to run it. They have a passion to do it, but they need to have people that can help them get there. And so I'm going to write a book. I wrote a book. It's called From a Jew to the Stew. because I have a Jewish background. But so
South African Jew.
yes, all the way from South Africa. Yeah.
And now we're in Texas, right?
We are. It's funny. People don't know much, I mean, I'm going to be politically incorrect, but if that's okay. But people ask me, so you're from South Africa? And I say, yes. And they say, well, how come you're not black? And I say, well, I've been wondering all my life because my mom and dad are. And it's like, whoa, that's crazy. I think they switched me at birth and I never really got put back in place. So I grew up in South Africa speaking Xhosa because mom and dad were black, And so, yeah, they're from the Xhosa tribe. So people ask me, well, what does that sound like? And I say, all right, I'm gonna speak some Xhosa. I'm going to say, hello, how are you? It's nice to meet you. And it sounds like this. Okay, getting okay.
Wow.
It sounds funny, but I tell people no, because if you have a stutter, it's not funny at all. Let me tell you about the question you asked me about this restaurant. And I was very successful in a pizzeria, and that's when I met Michael. And he sold me my very first touchscreen, point-of-screen system. And excuse me, that's how we became friends. And then we became business partners, and I taught him how to do force feeding through the POS system. He taught me about his end of the business, and so we made a very good marriage there. And so when my wife came to me at the time, and we had 7 pizzerias, and we wanted to expand, she says, "I'm leaving you unless you sell the restaurants." So I said, look, I can't have this. I mean, we've got 4 children. I said, let's do it. So we were going to do something she wanted to do. So I sold the restaurants, and she took the money. The next day, the money was in the account. She took it and left me with the kids. So now I have no job. I have a business I'm about to get into with Michael and Thomas. We had done preparation of the food and cooking, and we were going to start this new restaurant. Well, we signed a lease to start Pali Pali in this beautiful complex, and it began to rain, and it rained in Houston for 70 days non-stop, so they couldn't build it. We had signed the lease already, and finally the delay was about 9 months, and we had a loan from the bank, and everything was okay. We were going to build this amazing restaurant that you'd feel like you were on the plain of Africa once you entered inside. So we had paid an architect $45,000 to build this 2-story restaurant, and it was going to have this beautiful tree in it and lions, and it was from a vision that I had when I was a young boy. My school took me on a safari as one of our field trips one week. We went for a week, and during that time we saw a whole pride of lions capture their prey and eat underneath this tree. And I took this picture, and I thought to myself, one day I'm gonna do something with that tree and the lions, and I didn't know I was going to be in the restaurant business, but I've always wanted to pursue building a restaurant with the tree in the middle and the lions around it and so on. So we had the money to do that, and Michael and Thomas, my partner, said, "This is fantastic. This is a great idea. We're going to open this restaurant. We don't want any animals on the walls, but we can do the understanding of that. It's safari. You're going to walk on the plain of Africa the minute you walk into the restaurant. It's going to be very art modern kind of feel." So we went to the bank. We were ready to start building, and the bank said, "We are terribly sorry. It's 2008, and the economy collapsed, and the banks had lost all their ability to fund." So they said, the underwriter said, we can't fund you anymore." So we now had this lease that the clock was ticking, and I came back, and I didn't know what to do. Michael had no money. Thomas had no money. We couldn't even raise money. I mean, at that time, the only way you could raise money, if you give $1, the bank will give you $1. So it was impossible. So I got on my knees in the middle of that place one morning. It was a big concrete shell. And I got on my knees, and I began to blame God, for why did you do this to us? I mean, my wife took the money and left me with the kids, and I mean the church was putting groceries on our front door. I mean, it was a terrible time for anyone to have to go through. And so I got on my knees, and I began to blame God, and then I started crying, and I said, "God, I'll do anything if you help me just build this restaurant." And I didn't realize how profound that was, and tears coming down my eyes. There was a knock on my front door, and there was a guy there. His name was Luis, and he said, are you Chef Paul? And I said, yes. He says, well, I've come here to help you build your restaurant. And so like, oh, wow, okay. Like, and I'm thinking, yeah, right. This is a $1.8 million project. How are you going to do that, And he said, well, I have no idea. Well, I was at church and our preacher was talking about the law of reciprocity. And if you think your life's bad, go help somebody else. And he says, we haven't worked in 6 months. Can't find any work because no one's hiring or building. The economy had stopped. And he says, I have material, I have laborers, I have a painter, I have a plumber, I've got an electrician. None of us are working. But this is what we can do. If show me your plans. And so I showed him my plans. And of course, he said, there's no way we can do this. Because the plans had called for $500,000 worth of steel. Mm-hmm. He said, you're going to have to just get rid of the second floor and get rid of all the elevators and everything that you have in this beautiful design of your restaurant. And if you can get rid of all of that, maybe we can work with the metal studs and the wood, and we could figure something out. So I went away for 3 days, and I just completely thought about, okay, I said to God, I'm going to dedicate this restaurant to you. So how am I going to do that? And I'm kind of meditating and asking God to help me design this new restaurant. And so we decided to make an abstract form of the tree, and because the Jews were following God in the wilderness when they came out of slavery. And I felt like I was in slavery there because everything was removed from me and there was nothing I could do. But it was like, okay, there was a pillar of fire at night and a cloud by day, or vice versa. And so I thought, wow, what if we put the center of the restaurant a pillar of fire, and we surrounded with the names of the tribes of Israel? And then I thought, well, no, why did you show me this tree when I was like 12 years old? And it's got to have something to do with the tree. So I started looking up in the Hebrew and the Greek what the acacia tree meant, because that was the name of the tree that the lions were under when I saw it. And I've discovered that Moses and King David used this tree in a very, very spiritual way to hold the Ark of the Covenant. And the wood that they used to put the Ark of the Covenant in was the acacia wood. So I thought, oh, that's it. God wants me to put the tree in the middle of the restaurant. And I discovered that the acacia tree means tree of life. So now we have this tree of life, very abstract form. I surrounded it with a wavy wall to remind us of the desert journey, and I put up the names of the tribes of Israel. And so that became a dedication to God. And so it has a very spiritual undertone to this restaurant, and we're keeping it in the theme. We're now developing the tribes, and we're putting them in the walls as their symbols, and the lights coming from the back. It's going to be absolutely spectacular opening this next restaurant. I think more important that you walk into this amazing spiritual journey, and then you have this amazing food. And then it's backed up by incredible service, and we're building culture. So it's a lifestyle that we're creating. It's not, it's not so. It's about the experience of having this cultural, wow. And the one thing that I don't want to happen is that we lose that aspect of people walking into the restaurant having this high expectation of what it's supposed to be and the food, how it's supposed to taste, and then it doesn't live up to its potential. So we're going to make sure that we never lose sight of that. And it's kind of like our children. We want them to grow up, and we want them to be who we want them to be, but sometimes some of them just go off the deep end. I have 4 kids. They've all gone off the deep end, but that's okay. We bring them back, right?
So, Chef, if people want to learn more about you and your restaurants,
yes.
Where do they go?
PeliPeli.com. And we have a great website. We're changing it all the time. My partners Michael and Thomas are involved in working with that, and we're just so excited about the culture that we're bringing to the world. And my partner Michael is very involved with the cultural building. He is now our CEO. And I do the operational side of it, where I'm involved with all the cooking and the design, and then Thomas is involved with the nurturing. And so we make a really good team. So I'm really proud of that. So when you come into Pali Pali, you'll know, you can feel there's some warmth and there's something going on. You can't quite figure it out. But then when you try the food, it's like, oh my God. So
it feels like a very, very special place, and it looks like you got God on your side, and you got a lot of people.
Lose?
Yeah, how can you lose? So,
yeah.
I am really so happy for you. I can't wait to go visit you there and to see this beautiful artwork that you've created. So thank you for sharing.